In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
I worked abroad for 5 years to give my family a good life. When I returned, I discovered that my wife was using my daughter's college money to take her lover on vacation. Her reaction when I canceled the funds was shocking. I am 45 years old and spent the last 5 years working abroad to offer a good life to my wife Irene, 43, and our 2 daughters, Katie, 18, and Sandy, 16. My childhood deeply marked my decisions as an adult. I grew up with an absent father, one of those who spend the day at home doing nothing. He never had a stable job, never helped, and showed little interest in us. My mother, on the other hand, did everything. She worked endless hours, sometimes in 2 or 3 jobs simultaneously, just to put food on the table. She paid the bills, cooked, cleaned, and raised my siblings and me, practically alone. I loved her very much, but it hurt me to see her always so exhausted. She gave everything while my father acted as if nothing was his business. That experience made me promise that I would be different. I didn't want my future children to live through the same thing I did, seeing one parent carry all the weight while the other disengaged. I started from scratch. I worked any available job and saved every penny. I progressed little by little, step by step. I wanted a life where my daughters wouldn't have to worry about money, food, or if the electricity would be cut off. That's why I accepted the job abroad. Also because in my sector, local options were running out, with most jobs moving overseas. It was difficult to be away, but I wanted to give Katie and Sandy the best possible life without them going through the same difficulties that I did. I swore to provide for them and be the kind of father mine never was. I could have stayed here in another job, but it probably wouldn't have been enough to send them to college or maintain the standard of living they had. At the beginning of our marriage, I had a good local job, but the company closed its operations here and moved everything abroad. Katie and Sandy were little then. They offered me a position abroad, and I had to accept it because I knew I wouldn't find something similar here due to the situation in the sector. The downside was that I would have to be absent for long periods, sometimes up to a year, but the compensation was worth it. I could pay for private schools, save for their future, and buy a nice house. It was a sacrifice, but Irene supported the decision, accepting that it was the best for everyone. At first, it seemed to work. I would return every few months, stay for several weeks, and we would make the most of our time together. That was the agreement I reached with the company to make this dynamic possible. But as the years passed, I began to notice changes. The girls grew up and became more distant, and Irene stopped making an effort during my visits. I assumed it was just a phase. Teenagers being teenagers, and Irene feeling overwhelmed by handling everything alone. I thought that was the price I paid for prioritizing work over physical presence, but that it would be worth it when Katie and Sandy had the futures they deserved. It turned out I was naive and trusting. Last year, everything fell apart. A friend contacted me saying he had seen something concerning. Then he sent me photos of Irene with another man, Jeffrey, 48. These weren't casual photos, but complete family moments. Irene and Jeffrey smiling on beach vacations, Jeffrey at amusement parks with my daughters, and Jeffrey sitting at the head of my table. I felt devastated. Those trips had been paid for with the money I worked so hard for, and there was Jeffrey, a man with no job or income, playing father to my family. When I investigated further, I discovered the truth. Irene had been in a relationship with Jeffrey for years. He had been present while I worked day and night abroad to give them the life they enjoyed. I had to work intensely to get the free periods when I could return. Katie and Sandy not only knew Jeffrey, but they had accepted him. He had become their fun stepfather while I was away. On family trips, my daughters were there, enjoying the vacations I paid for, with Jeffrey, while I stayed in a small apartment on the other side of the world, missing birthdays and celebrations. I was devastated. At first, I didn't even feel anger, just a deep pain. I constantly wondered how they could do this to me, how Irene could betray me so completely, how Katie and Sandy, my own daughters, could treat this man as if he were their father. I had missed so many moments trying to give them everything, and in the end, I was nothing more than a paycheck to them. When I confronted them, their reactions were like stabs to the heart. Katie didn't even flinch. She simply said that I was never there. What did I expect? Sandy was quieter, but she didn't come to my defense either. To them, I was just an absence, and apparently that justified everything. According to their logic, I chose work over family, so the situation was my fault. Irene stepped in to say that Jeffrey had been there for her emotionally, and that I needed to accept reality. The reality that I spent years breaking my back for a family that quickly replaced me, a family that only saw me as a bank account. And Jeffrey, the guy they allowed to sit in my chair, at my table, hadn't contributed anything more than smiles and empty words. But the worst was yet to come. When reviewing Katie and Sandy's college funds, I discovered that Irene had been withdrawing money. Thousands of dollars had vanished. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to cause considerable damage. I felt sick. Then I understood. The trips, the vacations, the fun outings with Jeffrey, that's where the money had gone. Irene had used the funds I had spent years saving to take Jeffrey on vacations, shopping, and dinners. I saw photos of them smiling on beaches, eating at fancy restaurants, and having a good time while I was on the other side of the world working. Those moments of happy family were paid for with my money. Jeffrey didn't contribute anything. He couldn't. The man doesn't have a stable job or a penny to his name, but he was happy to enjoy the life I worked for. My daughters Irene and Jeffrey had fun while I missed birthdays and celebrations to provide for them. And instead of saving for Katie and Sandy's future, Irene spent their college money playing happy family with a man who contributed absolutely nothing. It was the worst part of the whole betrayal. I immediately contacted a lawyer and informed Irene that I was filing for divorce. And what happened to the remaining college funds? I decided to use every penny to pay the legal fees. I wasn't going to let Irene and Jeffrey get away with it while I kept paying the bills. My daughters are furious, especially Katie. She says I'm ruining her life by denying them the opportunity to go to college. Sandy claims I'm being irrational and unfair because Jeffrey doesn't have enough money to help them. But why should I care? They didn't care when they were laughing on the beaches with him. They didn't care when I missed Christmases or birthdays because I was working for them. They didn't care when Irene took Jeffrey to restaurants with my money. Now, suddenly, they're concerned because their futures are in danger. From my perspective, they made their choices. They chose to accept Jeffrey, they lied, they took advantage of my sacrifices, and now they face the consequences. If they want to be angry, let them be angry with Jeffrey for not being able to provide for them. Let them be angry with Irene for squandering their future. I worked hard for that money and sacrificed a lot. I even believe that if I had stayed here flipping burgers for minimum wage, they would hate me too because they would have had to change their lifestyle and wouldn't have a college fund either. I'm not going to finance their betrayal. Let Jeffrey step up now if he's such a good guy. Let him take care of paying for Katie's college. Let Irene and Jeffrey explain to Sandy why there's no money for her future. This is no longer my problem. Update 1. I recently filed for divorce. I've been back in the city for 2 weeks, and I'm trying to deal with everything as best I can. I've rented a small apartment because I no longer want to return to that house. It's been a lot to process since then. My phone doesn't stop ringing. Katie and Sandy constantly flood me with messages, always with the same theme. You're ruining our lives. How could you do this? You're unfair. I responded that I haven't ruined anything, that the money from their fund was spent on vacations, so they should complain to the real culprit. I don't feel sorry for them. They're not little girls. They accepted that my wife was cheating on me and were aware of it. I can't ignore the fact that for years they kept me in the dark. While I worked abroad, they spent time with my wife's lover. They not only shared time with him, they went on vacations together, went out to eat, played at being a happy family. All while I was thousands of miles away, working so they wouldn't have to work multiple jobs like I did to pay for my college because my parents couldn't afford it. I thought they would appreciate my sacrifice, but they didn't. And even when I confronted them, they weren't able to acknowledge their mistake. They made me feel like the villain. They said I was absent, that I wasn't there for them. I don't deny that I was physically away, although I called them constantly and wrote messages. It was a sacrifice I made, and it was also hard for me. Additionally, I worked intensely over there, so I could take entire months off and return. During these years, all I did was work hard and come back to be with my family, or what I thought was my family. I wasn't perfect, but I tried to make sure the distance wasn't a problem, or at least, not a serious one. Despite all that, they still thought Jeffrey was more of a father than I was, a man with no job, no money, and nothing to offer, who took advantage of their real father. He didn't even invite them with his own money, a man who has only taken advantage of me and my family, and who wasn't there for them emotionally either. In hindsight, they themselves have admitted that he wasn't a father figure, but they tolerated him because he made their mother happy since I wasn't around. I don't expect them to adore me just because I supported them, but I feel they owed me the truth. Nobody deserves to be cheated on, even less so in my situation. Instead, they kept me deceived for years, pretending everything was fine while living a lie with their mother and Jeffrey. How can I forgive something like that? How can I forget everything I've discovered and act as if it never happened? I don't think I can. Irene, for her part, has been completely brazen throughout this process. When I asked for the divorce, I thought she might show some guilt or remorse, but I was wrong. Her lawyer, who happens to be her sister Erica, 38, sent me a legal notification detailing the terms of the divorce that Irene intends. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The conditions are ridiculous. She plans to take everything I have after betraying me in the way she did. What makes all of this even more absurd is that we signed a prenuptial agreement before getting married, and that agreement is solid. I made sure of it. At the time, I thought I was just being cautious. I never believed I would have to use it, but now I'm glad I did. My lawyer reviewed everything and assured me that I had nothing to worry about. He advised me not to say anything to Irene or Erica for now, and to wait. He would take care of everything. The prenuptial agreement clearly states that Irene is not entitled to anything of mine, and according to my lawyer, her legal notification has no value. Still, it's exasperating, just for the sheer audacity of trying. I spent years working to build a life for my family, our family, and Irene spent that same time destroying everything behind my back. And Jeffrey? He's a useless person who doesn't know the value of effort. Irene has been like his mother, indulging him all this time. I don't understand what Irene sees in him, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore. I don't think they realize how much it hurts me to see my daughters take their mother's side in all of this. Maybe that makes me a bad father, but I can't pretend nothing happened. For now, I'm just focusing on getting through the divorce. I'll probably return to the country permanently and look for another type of work. When it's all over, I'll only have to support myself. I could stay abroad, but having family here, it's best to come back. Besides, I see that job differently now. It reminds me of everything that happened. Update 2. I recently received disturbing information from a friend, the same person who initially informed me about Irene's affair. He called to tell me that Jeffrey, the man with whom my wife was cheating on me, had moved into our house. When I heard it, I couldn't believe it. The audacity of both of them made me laugh, ironically. Not only did he have an affair with my wife, but now he lives in the house that cost me so much to build for my family. Irene, of course, took for granted that she would keep the house. She was already acting as if it were completely hers and believed she had the right to stay there. What she apparently forgot is that when we bought the house, a problem arose that prevented including her name on the deed. The property is still solely in my name, and she had completely forgotten about it or thought I would give it to her in the divorce. I decided to call her to communicate the news. She had to move out before the weekend. When I told her, she laughed at me. She claimed that the house also belonged to her and that I couldn't demand that she leave. I had to remind her of the problem we had when buying the house and that it was still only in my name. There was a pause, and I noticed she remembered what happened. Her tone changed, but she didn't give in. She tried to argue with me, claiming she had nowhere to go. Then she tried to make me feel guilty, mentioning how we had been together for 20 years and that should mean something. I responded that those years meant nothing to her when she decided to betray me, so they now had less value to me. I told her she could stay with him or go anywhere else. It was no longer my problem. She started crying, hoping I would feel sorry for her, but I didn't. As soon as I heard her crying, I hung up. Afterward, I received a message from Sandy. She was furious and told me some of the worst things imaginable. She accused me not only of taking away their future, but now also of leaving them homeless. I responded that at this moment, none of them were my problem. They're not little girls manipulated by their mother. One is 18 and about to go to college, and the other is 16. Both have asked me to meet because they want to clarify some things and explain to me what really happened. Part of me knows that won't change anything, but I want to know more details of what happened, and I have nothing to lose by meeting with them. It's not like meeting would soften me and allow them to stay in the house or pay for their college. I'm not sure what will happen in that meeting, but I'm trying to stay calm. I think I at least deserve to know what has been going on from the people involved, since Irene refuses to tell me anything instead of finding out from third parties. I'll probably come back to share what I discover after the meeting. It might not be much, but it's better than nothing. Update 3. I met with Katie and Sandy to talk, and it was much more intense than I expected. When we sat down together, I discovered so many things I wasn't prepared for. The first thing that came to light really surprised me. Irene had been telling them that they were basically my replacement family. She told them that I had another family where I worked, and that I kept them close in case I ever needed them someday. I don't know if this is true, or just a story made up by my daughters, but I don't understand what I would need them for if what Irene said were true. Perhaps for a transplant or something like that. Regardless of whether Irene really said that, It seems impossible to me that they believed it. I was always there for them, no matter how difficult the circumstances. I did everything possible to make them feel loved and cared for, even if it was from a distance. As I mentioned before, I traveled and stayed here for quite a long time, in addition to calling them daily and sending messages. If I had a second family and didn't care about them, I wouldn't have gone to that trouble. Again, it wasn't a perfect arrangement, but I tried to make it as good as possible. Then I started to wonder why Irene would say something like that, and I concluded that she probably did it to justify her actions, her affair, her betrayal of the family. Everything was easier for her to accept if she could convince herself that I didn't care about them. When I asked them more about what Irene had told them, they seemed confused. They assured me they had no idea that Irene was using their college funds. When I mentioned it previously, they assumed I was simply trying to blame them. But when I showed them the bank statements and the evidence I had, their faces turned pale. They were outraged. They didn't know that Irene had been taking the money destined for their future for her own interests. At this point, I think they're angry mainly because she used their money. I made it clear to them that I wasn't going to replenish their college funds. That money no longer existed, and I would probably need it when I permanently left my job and returned to live here. But when I told them that, they revealed the true objective of the meeting. They claimed that I was just like my father, and that they were as much victims as I was in Irene's plan, that they didn't deserve to be blamed for being caught in the middle of this, and that they were just kids between two adults. I asked them why they never mentioned anything to me before, and they responded that Irene had told them that if I ever found out about this whole story, I would hurt her, as if I could do it telepathically or by throwing money in her face. Then came the part where I realized how selfish they were, and that to save themselves, they were willing to sacrifice anyone. First it was me, now it was their mother. They proposed that they stay in the house, and that Irene would have to leave to gain my sympathy. I explained to them that the house would probably be sold as soon as my lawyer gave the go-ahead. They got angry because, according to them as a father, I was abandoning my daughters. That made me laugh bitterly. I'm their father when they need money, but when their mother was unfaithful to me, I meant nothing to them. Many people believe I'm right not to forgive my daughters so easily, but there are those who think they're just kids. I would agree if they were 6 years old. But that's not the case. I don't understand why, after everything they did, I should just give them the money. If I did, they would call me the fool. No matter what I do, some will see me as the villain. If I had stayed here, working in a job that wouldn't allow me to send my daughters to college, I would also be the bad guy in their eyes. If I look for a well-paid job in my sector, I'm still the bad guy. I wish life were so simple where I could be paid millions working just 2 hours a day. But in the eyes of some, I would surely still be the bad guy for spending too much time with them. Update 4. The divorce was finalized about a month ago, and things are finally starting to calm down. Irene has moved out of my house, and although I'm glad it's all over, it still feels strange. I really don't know what's going on with her now. I haven't spoken to her, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to know. It wasn't a peaceful goodbye, but it's over. All the demands she had presented during the divorce were rejected, thanks to the prenuptial agreement we signed before getting married. I wasn't willing to let her take anything that didn't belong to her. I worked too hard for everything and made sure the prenuptial agreement protected the sacrifice I made. Both Sandy and Katie will live with their aunt. Since Sandy is still a minor, I have to pay child support until she turns 18. That's what the law establishes, and it will only be for a short time. I've requested a paternity test as a precaution, and the results confirm that they are my daughters. Katie won't attend college because her mother can't pay for it, and I maintain my stance of not financing it. For my part, I've already resigned from my job, and I'm looking for something else. I'll earn less, but I no longer have a large family to support. Just child support, and nothing more. I can move closer to my mother, whom I've also been helping financially during these years, but unlike Irene, she hasn't been ungrateful for everything I've done. I don't know if this will be my last update or if there will be another, but I still want to thank you all here for your support. I know not everyone agrees with my decisions, but that's how things are. I can't ignore that my daughters were also part of the betrayal. And if some prefer to support those who participated in the infidelity, that's their choice. I don't say it with resentment. I just know that something like this, sooner or later, ends very badly. My daughters never respected me. I'm not saying I don't share some of the blame for that. I've never claimed to paint myself as a perfect father, but I also can't buy respect with money. That much is clear. I tried to create a balance between everything, and it didn't work. Giving them money now wouldn't significantly change things, in my opinion. Update 5. I think these events deserve an update, even if brief. My ex-wife is no longer with Jeffrey. Shortly after my last update, I found out that she had rented a place with him. But since my ex-wife barely had a poorly paid job, when Jeffrey saw that he couldn't get more benefit from that situation, he disappeared. I know my daughters have been pressuring her to help them pay for college or sign a loan, but my ex-wife is not in a position to do any of that. Neither am I, now that I've moved and bought a house near my mother to start over.